Hi, my name is Mia Armstrong-López, and I'm a managing editor at ASU Media Enterprise and one of the editors behind the Future Tense Fiction series, which publishes a short story every month in Issues in Science and Technology. Today, I'm joined by Margrét Helgadóttir, a Norwegian Icelandic author and anthologist. Margret's short fiction appears in many venues, and her debut 2015 book, The Stars Seem So Far Away, is an apocalyptic road tale set in a far future Arctic world. Her latest anthology is Nordic Visions, the best of Nordic speculative fiction, and Margrét is also the author of Tunnel Fever, which is June's future tense fiction story in Issues in Science and Technology. Margrét, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mia, for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's lovely to have you here, and I want to start by asking you to describe what Tunnel Fever is about.
Sure. And I also must apologize to everyone listening to this for my poor English. I don't speak English on a daily basis. Tunnel Fever takes place several centuries into the future on the seabed of the Arctic Ocean, where I describe a world with a network of tunnels where every road traffic moves through. There are, of course, main traffic, and there's also small network tunnels where people not that often passes through. The world I describe takes place in these distant, smaller tunnels where you can find a small roadside bar. And the story is about one of the waitresses, Vilde. She's a young girl. She dreams about living on the surface because she suffers from claustrophobia. Actually, the story is just about how she copes with claustrophobia and her everyday life in this bar. And of course, there's some action. There's plenty of guests, kind of quirky guests, and some with good intentions and some with not.
Yeah, I love the setting of sort of this roadside or tunnel side bar, because it seemed sort of the story is set so far in the future, but it seems sort of reminiscent of what you might find like on a road trip in our world today, right? You stumble upon a diner or a restaurant or a bar, and you have sort of a quirky mix of people who have different motivations and are dealing with different circumstances and challenges. And even beyond sort of the setting of the roadside bar, I think the world that you've constructed in the story is really compelling, as you're mentioning, sort of this network of tunnels that are under the sea, and so a collection of underground cities. What brought you to that world? Like, what inspired you to create that network of tunnels and explore how people might live within them?
Well, I could say that I'm Norwegian and we're quite famous for our tunnels. So actually, it's our history to have tunnels everywhere. We have tunnels in the mountains. We have tunnels actually under several of our fjords. So it's not that, foreign concept. When I write story, I kind of, it's not like I sit down and have an idea. I kind of sample ideas and fragments in my everyday life. I can read something cool, or I see some headlines, or hear somebody people talk on the tram or something. So I can't pinpoint, exactly what inspired it. But at some point, I think I've read about they were wanting to build underwater tunnels who floated. And I was like, how would that work? And I also had a neighbor who worked with building cable tunnels, for fiber tunnels from Norway to Great Britain. So, and that was on the seabed. And so I think I maybe started thinking, maybe in the future, it's not only electricity or it's not floating. They're actually have come so far that they have started to move the traffic below. And also I know there's, today it would be not that, it wouldn't go because of the pressure down there, and it's quite far down. It's, I don't know, it's tens and thousands of meters. But I think people have gone quite far in a few centuries to have figured that out, how to deal with the pressure. And so yeah, I
Yeah.
thought, why not? I've written other futuristic stories about how people or how humans cope with, everything from climate change, and it could be refugees, flocks, or something. But this is kind of another concept that, yeah, it's like people can't live on the surface, so we have to deal with it somehow. So we build the cities below ground, and we have to move traffic and elsewhere because we're still interested in connecting with other peoples, etc. So that's a different concept also for me, but I think it kind of worked. But I'm not sure, the other futuristic stories I've written, it's below ground, but yeah, it's different. I hope
Yeah.
people will like it.
Yeah, I think so. It's really interesting as you're talking about sort of your geographic and social relationship with tunnels, and what you might have in Norway or Iceland compared to, what we have in other places. And I'm interested, in the story, people turn to this network of underground cities and underwater tunnels because of really toxic air pollution, right? That makes it sort of no longer possible for people to live on the surface, in addition to, I think, rising sea levels and these other sorts of climate threats. So I'm just curious, as a writer, like, what do you want to explore about sort of climate change and our climate futures? What are sort of the angles of that you explore in your writing?
Well, I can say in general that I don't really have a political agenda or something. I just kind of, for the last decade, I've been thinking that we go in that direction somehow. And if we don't, if don't humans stop and do something. So maybe this is my contribution to actually describe, what if the worst goes worst, how will that be? But yeah, I kind of think that if we don't do anything, if we can't stop it, if it starts developing in a few centuries, there won't be an Earth where humans can live as we do today. Luckily, I think, not luckily, that's the wrong word, but I think people will always find a way. We will try to cope with the situation, and maybe not from one day to another, but they will try different solutions, and over the years they will figure out a way. And in this fictional world, they find, okay, we have to get out on the air. We can, of course, use masks on the surface, but that is just for extraordinary times being. If we want to continue decent life, we have to find other solutions, and that we have to get out of the air. So that is for this world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what you're mentioning of the ability of humans to adapt under extreme circumstances, or to find creative solutions is really interesting to me. And I think that it's something that is reflected in the story in a number of different ways. Actually, I think in many ways, the story is sort of about human relationships under extreme conditions. So we have sort of these extreme conditions of the underwater tunneled world, as you were mentioning and describing the story, right? The protagonist, Vilda, it sort of suffers from claustrophobia. There's a sense of, her struggling in that environment. And then, we also have another sort of situational or plot extreme circumstance when the bar is sort of descended upon by some tunnel robbers. And I won't spoil the whole plot, but Vilda, our protagonist, is forced to also sort of act or react in that situation of extreme stress. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about sort of relationships in the story, or human nature under extreme circumstances. What were you thinking about or trying to convey in those terms?
Well, it's pure psychology that people will act or react in different ways. You have really strong people who will, cope and there are, of course, others who will maybe not see the betterment of others, but more purely about themselves, and turn to criminal activities. So in this story, there's the main character, Wilda. She's, she's struggling with her own things, mental problems, etc. And she's really strong, I think, that, even have that kind of work. But she's struggling with anxiety attacks and so. But I think, and also her co-workers are really special. They have to be strong people, and that's what I picture them as. And then you have these guests, the old ladies and other people who, they have to be kind of outsiders in some way to be crazy enough to even want to go on road trips in such far away places. But I think the robbers, I'm not sure how to pronounce this in English, but I think there always will be people who will try to, not evilness, but they will always try to be bad in some way, criminal way.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, about this, I always, the old Western movies and stories, the plots, I kind of looked at them in that way, that these are the criminal cowboys who come to the city and, inside the road bar and create havoc and kind of the same situation, just, a different setting. And who knows what their agenda is. Maybe they're bored, maybe they're, I don't think they're remaking the tunnels because they are looking for money or something. I just think maybe they're bored, maybe they're desperate, maybe, they are the kind of humans who click in extreme conditions, maybe the wrong way, I don't know. And while the co-workers at the bar, maybe they stick together with other people, they, create a culture, they take care of each other. Vilda's co-worker, the chef, is really looking after her, and so that's what I think. It's people will not react in one way. There will always be different ways, even if in these really extreme conditions.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too, because the story also touches on how the circumstances or conditions of the environment that they're in this case, sort of the infrastructure, facilitates certain behavior, right? So in this case, there's a lot of conversation. There's a police officer, for example, who's in the roadside bar, and there's lots of conversation with him about how, well, people sort of know that they can get up to shenanigans in the tunnel because there's sort of no enforcement, or there's very little law enforcement. There's more sort of room, opportunity to sort of commit malfeasance. So it's sort of an interesting sort of also reflection. And we see that in our cities today, right? Like, where are the spaces where people know that there are less likely to be consequences, and what are sort of the factors that set that up? And I actually did want to talk a little bit too, because one of the things that I think is interesting is that in this world, there's sort of a very clear division of your resources determine your mobility in some ways, or the parts of the world that you're able to access. So you mentioned we have this sort of group of road tripping older women who clearly sort of have more resources because they're able to, travel between cities, and they even sort of elusively can go above ground. There's sort of this rumored island where you can go and it's a paradise and you can breathe the air and you don't have to be stuck underground. And then you have people who are like working in the roadside bar and trying to save up and trying to send money to their family members. So it is sort of a very stark contrast of your resources and your economic position and your ability to move in the space that you can inhabit in that world. So I guess when you were writing the story, or thinking about the story, what were you thinking about in terms of how economics affect your position in the city?
It's definitely affecting. Maybe not that different from today. I mean, there will always be people who have, who have more resources than others. I haven't pictured or described, I think, class society or something like that. But yeah, there will be people who have more resources than other, and in this story, it will be people who actually are bored, they don't want to stay home, so they go on a road trip and holiday, and that's what, you know. And also, there are maybe, I haven't described their age, just said they were old, but you could actually picture them as pensioners with little time, and they, you know, they go on like today you have people going on cruises and holidays when they retire. So maybe the same, but yeah, they have resources. And there's also Vilda's mother. She is also retired, but I haven't said what she works like, but I kind of picture her like, you know, maybe a blue collar in some way, waitress or cleaner or something with not that much income. So she wouldn't have money to do the same. But it's not like I describe a class society, I think. But yeah, it's people have different, like today, the people have different conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it very much reflected, I think, some of the dynamics we have today. And sort of the last question that I wanted to ask you, it just also has to do with the sense of place that is in your writing. So not just in this story, but you wrote a previous story for future tense fiction, and then in your writing more broadly, I think your writing has a very sort of grounded sense of geographic place, no? And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think your lens and perspective as a Nordic writer sort of shape the narratives that you're drawn to.
Sure. I think I also, you can see that in the anthology that you mentioned, I edited, that were present Nordic writers from all the Nordic countries. And people tend to look at them as the same, but there are actually differences. I think my background is not only Norway, but also Iceland, and we're close to the Arctic. So I'm kind of maybe trying to get that out, and also because I think there's little literature out there, you know, so that's kind of my contribution to actually try to present the world with some native writing in that way, or local writing. But yeah, it's grounded. But you also can see that in other Nordic writers, that they're kind of concerned about home, where they come from, close to nature, relationship with animals, especially for, you know, maybe Norway and Iceland, because we're close to the ocean, we're kind of, you know, occupied about the ocean, and we also have forests. And so in all mostly my science fiction writing, at least, is futuristic. I also have other writings, but in my science fiction writing, I kind of are concerned about, you know, it's up here, it's a vast ocean we have, it's immensely huge, and we have long distances. So kind of thinking about what will happen in a couple of hundreds of centuries in this part of the world where there's so huge distances. Maybe cars won't run. Maybe you can't, if you want to walk from the south to the north of Norway, you will use weeks. And how about all the ocean and the islands and Greenland and Svalbard, etc., etc. So I'm kind of maybe that kind of, you know, lodges in my mind like a concept, maybe not that conscious, but yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think your writing, it really does have a powerful sort of transportational force, and that I feel sort of cocooned by it, and that it brings me to these worlds that you've created. So
Thank
I
you.
encourage everyone to go read Tunnel Fever, which is June's feature tense fiction story. You can read it on Issues in Science and Technology at www.issues.org. And Margrét, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much.